From noise complaints to graffiti removal to bicycles being left on the streets and on the sidewalks. Those are some of the issues that Dan Riccio with the City of Charleston's Livability and Tourism is dealing with. I talked one-on-one with them for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Dan Riccio, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quintin.
Yes, sir. You are obviously the director of Livability, Tourism, and
all of the above. everything but the kitchen sink. How about that?
As a matter of fact, your division is obviously here to create a system that effectively, expeditiously, and equitably enforces city ordinances with the goal of improving and sustaining the livability and quality of life of all City of Charleston residents while promoting an environment that is receptive to tourism and historic preservation. Let me ask you this, Dan. What's new, what's now with your division?
Well, what's new? The latest addition to our department is a newly passed ordinance, which is the rental registry for long-term rentals. Now, historically, there have been issues in the neighborhoods that are more occupied by off-campus College of Charleston students. Some may become rowdy, not take care of their properties, and just long-time issues with short-term residents because they're here for 1 year, right? And then they go on, and the individuals that reside full-time are impacted by these issues. Well, historically, we've had a lot of issues in actually reaching out and touching the actual property owner. It's been a barrier for quite some time. And when I say property owners, referring to mostly absentee landlords, those who own properties who live out of state or out of the Tri-County area. So most of these rentals are owned by LLCs, right? And the LLC will have a registered agent that's assigned to that property, which we found in most of our cases is the attorney that actually did the licensing for the client. So there was no way for us to, and currently no way, to have a responsible person that we can reach out to in a timely manner if and when an issue occurs at these properties that are rented long-term. So this rental registry will go into effect January 2023. And the registry will require those living out of state to assign or have a representative that lives within 30 miles of Charleston, provide their contact information so that we can reach out to them in the event that there are issues so we can rectify the problem as swiftly as possible.
That's a whole lot of information right there. So let me take it back, Dan. Okay, so how many absentee landlords are there currently in the City of Charleston? What properties?
Well, most of the properties that are rented, you're looking at citywide. I'm talking not just the peninsula. I'm talking West Ashley, James Island, Johns Island, Daniel Island. You're talking probably 25,000 rental properties. In the city alone, I would guesstimate around 7,000 to 8,000 rental properties.
Wow.
Now, we will conduct a pilot program.
Sure.
This is just a pilot.
Sure.
It's a test phase for us. We're going to focus, and we chose, after being requested by the CNA Neighborhood Association, which is Cannon Elliott Borough. They have a high number of off-campus student population that reside in their neighborhood. So what we did is we looked across the board. We started with the downtown neighborhoods, and we cross-referenced calls for service to the police department and calls to us with nuisance issues, noise, garbage, leaving your trash can out, litter everywhere. So the high volume was, one of the top ones was Cannon Elliott Borough.
Wow.
So we chose that as a pilot. We will test this for approximately 6 months, give or take. We will see what is working, what needs improvement with the process that we are implementing, and then we will report back to council with an update. And still, council we'll have the opportunity to say, maybe let's test another neighborhood before making this citywide. So the ultimate goal, we want to be accountable. We want to be consistent throughout the whole process. So that would, entail the entire city of Charleston. However, there was discussion that to maybe keep it primarily downtown, in a zoned areas, a overlay, if you will, because that's where we have most of our problems. I'll be honest with you, we don't have these issues that we do on the peninsula with college rentals as often as we have, they're less often than other parts of the city. West Ashley, James Island, Johns Island.
Sure.
A lot of these college students reside in apartment complexes. They're managed by a company who manage themselves. So most of the ones we deal with are residential units.
Yes, sir.
So that's what we're looking at now. We're going to see how it works and see what we can do to make life better for the citizens of Charleston.
Yes, sir. So let me ask you this too, Dan. What was the let's say college population on the peninsula 2 years ago versus right now?
Well, off campus, that's an interesting question, because I'll tell you, with the confidentiality of the College of Charleston, to get a true number, we cannot go to the college and say how many of your students are off campus. They can't tell us that. So we have to rely on our own collected data. There's quite a few. You're talking about 11, 12,000 student population now. Probably 2,000 of that is on campus. The rest is off campus. So it's quite a bit. It's just a hard number to gather now because of the process through the college and being able to provide that student information.
Interesting. Well, let me ask you this, Dan. So when people do sign up for this rental registry, and I know this is a silly question, but how many people do you expect to sign up for this registry?
Well, Cannon Elliott neighborhood has approximately, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's about 13 to 1,400 rentals.
Wow.
So everyone should apply for the application. And granted, when we first explored the ordinance and legal department drafted that ordinance, so it took 2 years just for this recent ordinance. And we did our homework. We studied. Columbia has an ordinance that is closely related to ours, or was. We met with Columbia reps and their staff and asked how it's going and what we need to look for, and they helped us do that. And we had a pretty restrictive ordinance in the beginning. It called for inspections by a home inspector. It called for a penalty system that was much like a driver's license, a person with a driver's license. There was a point assessment to each property if you students or you as a landlord was a repeat violator, you lose points. And the loss of all your points, what happens when you lose your points on your license? You lose your license, your privilege to drive. That would ultimately result in you're losing your privilege to rent. That was decided upon as not a route that the city wanted to take by council. We did get it down to the nuts and bolts. And honestly, I'm happy with that. It does give us a system. It's just a registry. It's not a permit process. They just have to register. Just give us the proper information of somebody that we can contact. And that's really, I feel that we accomplished our goal with just that little portion of the ordinance. But I think it's one of the strongest portions of the ordinance that was kept.
So, Dan, let me ask you this too. Obviously, the registry is coming out in January. But how many repeat offenders have you had to deal with? You and your department have had to deal with over the past couple of months?
Well, many. A lot of problems we have now are, and you'll see it's cyclical. When the college begins in August, right? you have an uptick in violations, noise, trash. It's the new students coming in. They're off campus, probably most of them for the first time in their lives, away from their parents. And this is the other good part of this ordinance. It basically educates the student of our rules. Follow me?
Yes, sir.
That has not been done. Or we listened and believed what landlords were telling us, saying they know the rules. This will ensure that the rules are posted inside their apartments, so they know the rules. They'll know when to take out the trash. They know what's going to happen if there's a loud party. So this is an added measure to educate students. And quite frankly, at this point now, our calls are going down. Why? It's almost Thanksgiving, right? They're buckling down, getting ready for their test. So you see how it works, right? It goes up. You have a holiday, goes down. After the holiday, goes up, right? Gets closer to summer. People are buckling down, studying, and it goes down. It's a constant roller coaster. To give you an exact number would be a little hard, but it's like playing whack-a-mole a lot, okay? It goes, you hit it down, but it pops back up. So this is to try to ensure that we can just have a tool in place to help us facilitate that.
With those landlords, Dan, what truth have they told you thus far about the complaints that you've all received, and what is actual fact?
Well, if I understand your question, is how truthful are they?
Yeah, how truthful are the landlords when it comes to the complaints that you all bring to them?
Well, I don't know if I define it as true. How truthful they are. Of course, they want their tenants to comply. And on the flip side of that, they don't want them evicted because they bring in the money, right? So that's, to me, generates a problem within the system, right? You want to tell don't do that. It's a bad thing. So basically, what we get from tenants or from the landlords is, you go after the tenants, but I'm like, we need your help to educate your tenants. It's not just the burden on us. The burden needs to be on the landlord that is renting that property to take responsibility. And I'll say it in this interview that technically by law, we have the option that when we are investigating a violation, anyone who resides at that property can be cited. The landlord can be cited, or the property manager, and the owner can be cited. Normally we try to handle it with the tenant only. They're the one creating the problem. But when it gets to a situation where it's happened at a property where it's continuing, then we have to bump it up a step and then enforce it with the landlord as well. That usually takes care of it. It gets their attention that they too can be held responsible. We just try to be fair and be consistent with the tenants, but if we can't achieve our goal with compliance with the tenant, then we have to escalate to the property manager.
And I'm looking at Canterbury and it's Hansonburg now in my mind, but how many officers are assigned to the area just for those particular complaints?
Well, the police department handles noise, and disturbances. They do the bulk of it. We do quite a bit with our nuisances of property standards, things of that nature. Just after a party, leaving your property a mess. That's when we come into play. But however, we have a great communication network now with our police department, with the College of Charleston Department of Public Safety, with the Dean's office at the college now. It's the strongest it's been since I've taken over Livability. The strongest. The police will reach out to us. And for example, what happens when a police officer rolls up on a loud party? All of a sudden, doors start slamming, people start running, lights go out, right? And the officer gets there, and no one's like, There's no one to, it's cleared out in minutes, right?
Yes.
Well, they'll reach out to us and say, hey, Dan, we went to so-and-so street, this apartment. There was a lot of party. The tenants locked the doors, ran inside. Everybody ran. Can you help us? Sure. This rental registration will help even better. Now, we have been, and we have created our own database, if you will, over the years with properties, but that changes, and it's not a requirement. They're not required to give us that information. I'm not saying that all property managers are behaving poorly. No way whatsoever. But because for the most part, it's always that 1%, 2% that spoils the whole bunch, right? So we do get a lot of cooperation from many property owners. It's just a few, and those are the repeat offenders of the habitual problems that we can't put our hands on in a timely manner.
What are those problems right now that you can't put your hands on right now?
Anything from going to that house trying to find the property owner. First thing we do is go to Charleston County Records.
Sure.
LLC.
Sure.
Go to Secretary of State.
Right.
LLC comes to attorney so-and-so.
Right.
Call the attorney. Attorneys, we ask, we need the information on your client. Not going to give it to you. They're not required. So it's we do a lot of chasing, and we find dead ends. So it makes our job much more difficult, much more time consuming, and this will allow us to take care of these issues quickly so we can get on with business.
And speaking of which, I know your livability code enforcement officers work to ensure that the city codes are followed in relation to residential property standards, health and sanitation standards, abandoned vehicles, short-term rental regulations, garbage disposal regulations, graffiti removal from public property, and removal of abandoned bicycles in the right-of-way.
Yes.
Can I break that down?
Mm-hmm.
How many abandoned vehicles are currently in the city?
There's quite a few, but when you say abandoned, you got to the definition is clear. You can determine quickly if a vehicle is considered abandoned if it's on a property, jacked up, no tires, busted out windows.
Right.
Okay, to be in violation of the ordinance, it must not be in operable condition, and if it doesn't have a tag currently registered, right? So a lot of people think that this ugly vehicle that's sitting on 4 wheels and it's ugly, but it's got a tag. And the test that we do is, would you please start it up?
Right.
They start it up. They're in compliance. It's just those vehicles that are not operable and just, and again, it's to get rid of the eyesores, the aesthetic issues. It's not to incur hardships on the owner, because we help. We do everything we can to help them. Sure. If they need resources, we try to help them with resources. The Kidney Foundation will take vehicles.
Wow.
We recommend them. There are tow companies out there, or salvage yards that will come pick your vehicle up and pay you money. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know that. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I would have done this a lot sooner.
Right.
So that's how we manage the abandoned vehicles on private property.
So Dan, this is probably another silly question here, but let me ask you, do you and your department find more abandoned vehicles on the peninsula or in the rural areas like Johns Island, James Island?
I think it's pretty equal. I think if I had to say, Johns Island is more rural, okay? Naturally, in a rural setting, you'll have more clutter.
Right.
And a lot of properties on Johns Island are still in the county. They may have different rules and regulations. The assumption is always that it doesn't in the city. That's not the case. So it all depends on the jurisdiction. So it's hard to say there's more on Johns Island than James Island and West Ashley than the peninsula. Really hard to say that because once you get into unincorporated areas, the PSD, West Ashley, the James Island PSD on James Island. So all those factors are taken in place with the property standards. We cannot enforce those issues on other residences that are not in the city's jurisdiction.
So, what is your communication with the counties and the unincorporated areas as far as government on that?
We have a very good relationship.
Okay.
Lisa McCrae oversees zoning for the county and their code enforcement. She's a retired deputy sheriff with law enforcement. As I was a retired lieutenant from the police department. We've known each other back then. We have a good working relationship now. They find the issues in the city, they refer to us. We find issues in the county, we refer to them.
And what are those issues that you refer to them, which are current right now?
Mostly it's property standards. It's people not taking care of their yards, abandoned houses, abandoned vehicles, all of the above. Just unsightly conditions of the properties.
I want to get back to that in just a second, but I forgot. I glossed over while I was talking to you, but obviously your department also removes abandoned vehicles in the right of way. As you know right now, Lyme has flourished on the scene here in Charleston.
Right.
How has that made your department and your job more difficult?
That's difficult because, there's a reason for those bicycles, and they're fixing that issue.
Oh, good.
We've met with Lyme.
Wow.
There is an issue with their whatever they call it, geofencing with these bikes and locating them when the time runs out, right? And the bike stops and you can't move it. So it's been a nuisance. Most of our departments have been helping when we see it. This originated in the planning department as a program with strong ties to traffic and transportation department. We have all met. They're ironing out that. You see less now than you did right in the beginning. It's because we brought awareness to it, and they are taking measures to fix that problem with the locating these bikes.
Yeah, because that was a big thing that I saw in Nashville. They left the e-scooters in the middle of the sidewalk and all that stuff, so that's very dangerous. Going back, obviously, to what you talked about earlier as far as properties and residential properties, what short-term rental regulations have had the most pushback thus far from your department?
Well, I wouldn't say pushback. We enforce the ordinances of short-term rental, and it's very simple. All the application process goes through our zoning department. This is zoning regulated system, if you will. So my department is, in most cases throughout the city, is in charge of enforcement. So what we do is I have 2 full-time officers, code officers. That's all they do every day, is they manage and enforce the unpermitted short-term rentals, okay? So if you don't have a permit and you're advertising, then you can get in some trouble. People wonder how we catch them. Simple. We use a third-party contractor that is has software that helps us track and find, locate all these properties. But going in when we first started enforcement, and I lose track of time. 2019, 2018. We started, I think. 2018. Forgive me. We have a lot going on in our apartment, and it's hard to remember exact dates. But once we, began implementing and enforcing the ordinance, we really quickly grasped the industry as a whole, because what was happening, short-term rentals out there without this software to help us can be very difficult. But I made it a point very early on in enforcement, because this company extracts this information of all these platforms for us. They provide the information to us. We don't base it on the information they give us. We do a full-blown investigation for each and every case that we have for an unpermitted short-term rental. So what do I mean by that?
Yes.
Officer gets a case. This address is advertising. Here's pictures of the advertisements. Here's who's doing it.
Right.
They give us records of how long they've been renting, how much money they've made on the rental. All that information is what y'all can't see, is what we can see. That's the beauty of the software. So my guys start from scratch.
Sure.
County records, state records. They also do on-site inspections of the property. They look for evidence that's indicative of a short-term rental, a lockbox with a combination code. They look for a maid service. They look for out-of-state tags. People don't realize that short-term rentals are kind of conducted like hotels, right? You got to check in at a certain time, check out at a certain time. We know what time it is, right? So we know when to sit there.
Yes.
So we gather the evidence. We sometimes, it can be uncomfortable. We knock on the door and obtain information that way. We don't like to do that, but the bottom line is for the safety of the occupant, right? Because when they go through the permitting process, it's a pretty serious process. You have to go through a strict fire marshal inspection, and there are requirements by the fire marshal. So that's our intent. One is quality of life for the inundation of the individuals in these residential neighborhoods. Obviously, safety. So we take it very serious. But again, we do have to knock on a door sometimes. But we build that case. We find out who the owner is. We notify the owner. A lot of them are out of state. So people are like, what do you do? Very simple. When we gather an information, we get a case going. We notify them by mail. If they don't respond, then we hire a process server within that jurisdiction, provide them with the evidence that we have to deliver to the violator, and they do that. And it is a cost to the city. However, when those individuals are brought to court, we ask for restitution of the judge for the monies we spent that our taxpayers had to spend, and we are reimbursed. So we're just fronting the money until we get the case resolved and we get our money back, so there's no cost to the taxpayer.
So what are those unpermitted cases that you have right now on your desk?
Well, there's quite a few, and it's a daily process. Okay, people are very, very cunning. They come up with ways to circumvent the system, and I could say it. People know about it. There's many platforms out there. A lot of times they'll advertise during the day and take it down at night, right, to try to hide. But we catch them.
Right.
So it just takes a little extra time, and believe it or not, we get a lot of compliance by just sending them the letter and saying, this is what's going to happen if you continue to rent without a permit. So that has been successful. I won't say hundreds. I will tell you, we have had hundreds go through court already.
Wow.
We have nearly 100% conviction rate because we are very, very serious about our documentation of evidence with this process. We do have dismissed some based on plea deals. For example, in any case, any criminal case, right? If you're charged with 8 counts of this, we have had people charged with 8 counts of violating the rental registration. I apologize. I got rental registration on the brain. The short-term rental process. And we will, it's $1,087 each. And the judge usually applies that bond or that fine of $1,087. So sometimes we will, as a plea deal, maybe dismissed 1, maybe 2 out of 8. You plead guilty to the rest. We'll live lenient on all the other ones and suspend those for a certain period of time. So we still have a blanket if they continue to do it afterwards.
So what exactly is that blanket?
Well, it's like when you suspend a sentence, okay? is for a period of time. If you reoffend,
Right.
that sentence could be reimposed by the judge if we had to take them back to court.
Wow.
So we still have
Yes.
a blanket in a sense.
So how many people are reoffended when you all are giving them basically a break?
I'll be honest with you, only a handful. Only a handful. But they don't do it anymore
Wow.
after a few times. They finally get the message. So that number is low.
Wow. So Dan, let me ask you, how many rental and vacant properties are there in the city right now?
Well, vacant property, now you're switching on me. We're going to,
I'm sorry. I thought it was related to that. I'm sorry.
nope. Short-term rentals are right now today, citywide, there's 417 that are permitted. It's in the city.
So what is the number of renter-occupied units versus owner-occupied homes in Charleston?
You're talking about long-term versus short-term?
Yes, sir.
Well, you're getting a number that I'd have to get back with you on
Okay.
an exact number. You're talking, like I said before, if there's 471 permitted STRs, then there's 417 short-term rentals that can operate. Obviously, they're going to be the ones operating that are non-permitted, right? And that's whack-a-mole too. It's just a matter of catching them.
Yes.
But it's actually working. It's making a difference. To get back to your long-term, that doesn't have to be owner-occupied. The short-term rentals have to be owner-occupied. So to say long-term, it's not, because the owner doesn't have to live there.
Okay. So how many vacant units have decreased, that is, since in the past 2 years, I would say?
For the rental market,
Yes, sir.
that's that. I can tell you this.
Yes,
I don't measure it by vacant units. We measure it, and we did not at first.
Okay.
But as we progressed, we realized that we were actually doing a good thing by returning rental properties back to the housing stock. So we actually track that. So far to date, we have approximately 256 homes have either been sold or gone from a short-term to a long-term rental because of our enforcement efforts, and that's a pretty good number.
Does the city know why vacant units are proportionally high, even though the total inventory is increasing?
No, I'd say that's a zoning question.
Okay.
And those are, you're talking about properties that are privately owned.
Oh,
The vacant properties that we deal with under our purview are the ones that are, most of them are uninhabitable. You can't live in them
right.
because they're structurally compromised and things. So I don't put that into that equation.
Okay.
That is an animal of itself. Short-term rental, long-term rental, abandoned vacant buildings, totally different categories.
And I know there's a lot of those abandoned buildings on the east side.
Honestly, I will tell you, when I first started this process in 2010, we had over 500. We're down under 200 now.
Okay.
Can't take all the credit. Enforcement's one.
Okay.
But look at the housing boom here with people, developers buying properties further north. That's contributing to the decrease in the uninhabitable vacant properties because they're being restored. So that's a helpful.
Now, let me ask you this. What policies would support for reinvestment in neighborhoods that can increase the confidence of owners to redevelop available land or renovate vacant housing units to reestablish that occupancy?
Well, that's a good question. You're hitting me with another zoning planning question
Sorry.
that I will try to answer. Well, incentives to the city. Obviously there are. I will say the city. There are state incentives for buying properties that are vacant. There are tax incentives that are on the books now, and people have used those. Right now, that's the only one that I know of is a state incentive for tax purposes for having these properties. Some of these properties are acquired by the city for affordable housing. So that I don't know if that totally answers your question, but yeah, that's the best answer I can give you.
Now, Dan, would you, and this might be a trick question here, but would you be in favor of establishing residential improvement districts in the city to not only promote the stability of existing neighborhoods by monitoring conditions, but also to provide new gathering places?
Well, you're talking about the bid, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I encourage it in the commercially zoned area like they're going to do in King Street.
Oh, yeah.
Bid, I think, would be difficult in residential areas. That would be a little different. However, your homeowners, I say homeowners association, but your neighborhood associations are your go-to for your leadership for your neighborhood. So, and we have quite a few, several hundred neighborhood associations throughout the city that we rely on to incentivize people to invest in their community. I can't get into the nuts and bolts of what exactly those incentives are, but that's what I encourage a bid process for the commercial corridor. That is an investment by the business owners throughout the city, just because of the activities and the restaurants and the bars and things of that nature. Neighborhoods, I look at it a little differently. It's a total different twist, if you will, but we rely on neighborhood associations to be the leadership in the community, to address the concerns and help facilitate our processes in their community and communicate that to their residents.
So, for instance, what concerns are you hearing, say, on the east side?
You know, it's every neighborhood's the same. It's the same. I mean, every neighborhood experiences some type of discomfort, and I try to use that as politically correct. Unfortunately, you're going to have violence in every single neighborhood you live in. I'm sorry, it doesn't. You know, some are less, some are others. You're going to have shootings. You're going to have people get robbed. So, you know, obviously, the east side has always been an area that has been more prone to that activity. I think it's changing, but all in all, each neighborhood has the same concerns and the same issues, but different neighborhoods have a different level of those issues. But they all experience the same type of issues.
So, what new neighborhoods in the city have design requirements to ensure future development is consistent with the establishment community character?
You're killing me with these zoning and planning questions again. No, but I do. I attend a lot of meetings, and I don't want to misspeak.
Sure.
But there are, you know, obviously new construction, right, is different, and there's many requirements through planning. So I can touch on some, but I'm not.
Sure.
I don't want to say something that
Sure.
I'm not totally 100% educated in. So that question is really more for the planning director to answer.
And going back, obviously, to the other issues that you all have to take care of, I'm sure, around the city, but let me ask you, how much graffiti have your officers had to remove for the past 30 days?
30 days, whew, that's whack-a-mole, too. I would probably say within 30 days, probably at least 30 locations, 40 locations. Because a lot of them pop up and we wipe them off, okay? The more difficult ones are the ones that are on private property. We remove your electrical boxes, things on every, you know, in the right of way, telephone pole areas. We respond. It's our goal to get within a 24-hour period to try to take care of these problems. Now, when it's on private property, unfortunately, it kind of escalates to a level of vandalism. And the other unfortunate thing is, when these guys, these people, who to me is very disrespectful, commit this vandalism, you know, they're hitting these historic properties, especially the brick. It's hard to remove that without damaging historic fabric. So, and it costs the homeowner money. So, you know, on the private property or the right-of-ways public property, you know, it's a day-to-day issue with us. That's what a lot of kids do, and you know, they tag these properties to whatever reason.
So, in the past 30 days, Dan, how many of those graffiti incidents have actually been on private property?
Recently, I would say about 5 or 6 that I know of right up off the top of my head.
Okay.
Normally, the property owner will take care of it pretty quickly. Some go unnoticed we don't know about because they do take care of them. It's the ones that are really big tagged on the walls that may take longer to get rid of. And it's just an eyesore until they can get the finances up or, get someone to do it. Hire a contractor to do it.
Yes, sir. And speaking of right of way, let's talk about traffic. Where can and can't rickshaws go in the city of Charleston?
Rickshaws can go anywhere on the right of ways in the streets and on the public right of ways. Okay, when they start riding through the parks, that's prohibited. They and let me kind of clear this up with pedicabs.
Sure.
We enforce the pedicabs.
Okay.
Traffic and Transportation permits them to operate on the city streets. What we enforce really are if they're touring. You're not allowed to tour on a pedicab.
Right.
A pedicab is exactly what it is. It's a cab. It's just a bicycle. When you hire Uber or Yellow Cab, you're not asking for a tour, right? You want to get from point A to point B and give them the money and get out of there, right? Well, these pedicab guys and girls, I understand they want to try to make a tip and they offer these extra sightseeing information, which is it's not out of being unfair. It's out of being safe. Because when they take their eyes, right, when they're talking to you, what are they doing? They're taking their eye off the road. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Boom.
Yeah.
You have an accident. That's why we enforce the touring regulations. Now they do have to abide by the laws of the state of South Carolina's traffic rules. So they do violate those as well from time to time.
And how many of those violations have your office received?
Mostly it's the police department that handles the running the stop signs and stuff like that. We can write them. As in any case, it's hard to be at every intersection with these pedicabs and witness a traffic violation, right? It's pretty easy to figure out if they're touring because they're, we're going this way.
Right.
So, but it's still a challenge to enforce the touring, but we are able to do it.
What are those issues that you have as far as enforcing?
With pedicabs?
Yes, sir. That's what I should
That's
say.
really it. I mean, honestly, it's parking. Sometimes it's parking.
Yeah.
There are required areas, regulated areas for them to park. Sometimes they won't listen and they'll take up an area they're not supposed to. We try to be as lenient as possible. We know they're trying to make a buck, but we want them to be safe. So we will have to encourage them. We like to say, look, go find another place that's regulated. We don't want to have to give you a ticket for this.
Right. And speaking of bikes, let me go back to the line bikes. Are e-bikes allowed on the sidewalk?
All of them, no bicycles are allowed on sidewalks, okay? The only place in the city that I know of that is allowed is on, believe it or not, I think the upper Battery, because it's considered some type of district for bicycles. But there is a certain ordinance that will allow them to do that on the upper deck. But all in all, bicycles need to abide by the same rules. Stop at stop signs. Don't go wrong way on the one way. Don't weave in and out of traffic. All of the above. And again, the police department are the enforcement mechanism for bicycles.
Okay. And I've personally seen drivers, a lot of them driving down the wrong way, down one-way streets on the peninsula. So what is the city's 5-point plan to enforce this?
Well, to me, it's education. You try to educate, and it's difficult to enforce on a bicycle sometimes. The police department does enforce, that's their mechanism. However, we educate. We actually, for tourism, we have placards that we hand out to hotels that have bicycles and the bike shops that have basic rules. And actually, we punched holes in them so they can just, if they can put them on a zip tie and put them on the front handlebars, just as that awareness. So our major role is to educate and try to prevent people from not following the rules of the road.
And speaking of road, let's go to the drivers with the cars. What's the city's plan to stop that from people going around the wrong way on the one-way streets on the peninsula?
Well, that's a police issue, a police matter. They do all enforcement of traffic code. My guys are code enforcement. They're not sworn officers. They don't carry weapons. They don't, they don't have badges. They do have an emblem on their shirt that notes them as a code enforcement officer. So, but that's, that's a police question for you.
And speaking of code enforcement, let me go over here to King Street. How many violations have you all received in the past year or so from many of the businesses there?
Oh, I have an officer assigned to the Central Business District daily. The most issues we have in the corridor are leaving their trash can out at that prescribed time, not, especially for the restaurants, not properly cleaning the sidewalk. Those are the two main complaints that we have in those. And we have violations every day. Not every violation ends into a summons, okay? Except for the repeat violators. And even if every once in a while they forget, we're lenient. Hey, get this cleaned up.
Yes.
In a timely manner, we'll leave you alone. So that often works as well. We don't try to be heavy-handed unless we really have to get the message across.
And going to the residents, Dan, what are the fines for garbage cans left in the street or on the curb after certain days?
$1,087 fine. Every one of our violations can result in up to $1,087 fine. And get this, up to a 30-day jail sentence for a trash can. Does that happen? No. But there's a reason for penalties to be in place, right?
Yes, sir.
So there must be a consequence for the action, right? So that's the judge will assess a fine that's appropriate for each case. So it's at the discretion of the judge. Very rarely does a trash can violator receive $1,087 fine.
Yeah. And two more questions for you, Dan. So what is the improper placement of trash cans or garbage in public places in the city?
Okay, improper, right?
Yes, sir.
Improper is really for your bulk items, okay? Improper placement or put out is what we refer to.
Okay.
Having more than 90 gallons of debris. Usually you're supposed to have enough debris, even if you do the measurements, should fit in your trash can, right? But obviously people place them at the curb. Anything that is obviously branches longer than 4 feet. There's prescribed in the ordinance how you're supposed to lay this out and what the dimensions are, so these trucks can come in and get the debris and handle the issue. Another thing is throwing trash bags just all over the sidewalk. That's improper put out. You put it in the trash can. Also contractors. We have a lot of issues with contractors. If you hire a contractor, it's the duty for that contractor to haul that debris away, not the city to come pick up. Now, if you, as a homeowner, did your own work, yeah, you could place that out at the curb, but not a contractor or even a yard guy.
Right.
Same thing. A yard guy is supposed to take that debris away. We do get cases like that. We do issue summonses from time to time for that, because that's, it's not the city's responsibility. They're getting paid for a service, so they need to haul that stuff away.
Yes, sir. And how many people have actually gotten summons because of that?
It's not often. I mean, a handful have. We usually, again, give warnings. Don't do it again, and that resolves the problem. I tell people, our goal is to resolve the problem, right? It's not to penalize people.
Okay.
Yes, we have to enforce. I do not measure success by tickets. I measure success of what we have accomplished, what we have resolved. Whether it's by picking up the phone and talking with you, maybe it's writing a warning, and that warning gets a lot of attention. But you have to be, pretty deaf, if you will, not listening to us to get that ticket. Not unless you're just egregious. And, it's a case-by-case basis. If you just are so blatant, you're just like, I don't care, I'm dumping it, then that's going to have to escalate to a ticket. But if you're just, commonly make a small mistake, as long as we achieve our goal, we measure success by resolving the issue.
And another issue, as you talked about earlier, is obviously parties. So what exactly is the process to receive a permit for parties in the city?
You're not getting a permit for a party in the city.
Just want to make that sure.
Yeah, you can't get a permit for a party, especially a college party in the city. There are permits for some private parties that escalate to 250 people or more, but that's but there's a lot involved there.
Yeah.
You have to hire police,
Yes.
and things of that nature. A college kid cannot come in here and get a permit to have an underage drinking at a party.
Make sure I want.
So that's not going to happen.
Want to
That's
make sure
not going to happen.
Right. Yeah, one of my questions from one of the viewers. So how many complaints have you gotten, say, for this is another silly question, about, dogs and all those issues?
Again, the dogs are really under the purview of the police department and animal services. We assist them when we can or when we're asked to do. But the animal services officers handle the dog situations with people not taking care of their waste and things like that. We do assist in the parks. If people are doing it in the parks, we have been known to approach someone, have them pick it up, give them a warning or whatever, and have them address the issue taken away.
Well, Dan Riccio with the City of Charleston's Livability and Tourism Department. Thank you for your time and welcome back to Quintin's Post House.
No problem, buddy. Take care.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, sir.